My name is Madeline Carson, 29, and I never thought my success would become my greatest liability. The penthouse I'd sacrificed everything for became the center of family warfare at my sister Brooke's wedding. When my parents demanded I sign it over to the newlyweds, my refusal earned me a stinging slap from my mother that echoed through the reception hall. "Don't be selfish," she hissed as guests stared. I didn't cry or scream. Instead, that slap awakened something in me. My revenge would echo through their lives forever. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up against family who tried to take what you worked for. Growing up in a middle-class Boston suburb, the dynamics in the Carson family were clear from the beginning. I was the responsible one, while my sister Brooke was the undisputed golden child. 3 years younger than me, Brooke had a natural charm that captivated everyone, especially our parents. Diana and Robert Carson weren't terrible parents. They provided a stable home and encouraged education, but the favoritism was undeniable. When report cards came home, my straight A's were expected, while Brooke's passing grades were celebrated. When I won academic competitions, my parents would nod approvingly before quickly shifting the conversation to Brooke's latest social achievement or fashion choice. The pattern was subtle at first, but grew more pronounced as we entered our teen years. College marked our first major divergence. I received acceptance letters from several prestigious universities, including Yale and Columbia, but the celebrations were muted by the reality that came with them. I would need to pay my own way. My parents sat me down for the talk about financial responsibility. "You're so smart and capable, Madeline," my mother said, her hand patting mine in what felt like consolation rather than congratulation. "We know you'll figure it out. Your father and I need to save for Brooke's education. You understand, don't you?" I did understand. I understood that their retirement accounts were healthy, that they had just purchased a new SUV, and that my needs simply ranked lower on their priority list. Still, I nodded and accepted my fate. During my 4 years at Boston University, I juggled 3 part-time jobs while maintaining my GPA. I worked as a research assistant, waited tables on weekends, and took overnight shifts at a 24-hour convenience store during exam periods. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't often afford. Meanwhile, when Brooke entered NYU 2 years later, our parents covered her tuition, apartment, and living expenses. After graduation, I faced the brutal reality of the 2008 financial crisis. The real estate market, my chosen field, was in shambles. While my classmates retreated to their parents' homes or took whatever jobs they could find, I remained determined. I started at the very bottom, working as an administrative assistant at a struggling real estate firm where the pay barely covered my shared apartment's rent. For 2 years, I observed, learned, and positioned myself for opportunity. When the market began to recover, I had developed enough industry knowledge and connections to secure a junior agent position. My work ethic became legendary in the office, first to arrive, last to leave, always available for clients. By 27, I had climbed to become one of the top producing agents in Boston's luxury market. The Penthouse represented everything I had worked for. Located in a renovated historic building in Beacon Hill, it offered panoramic views of the Charles River and the Boston skyline. At $1.8 million, it stretched my financial limits, but after crunching the numbers and securing a favorable mortgage, I signed the papers. The 1,800 square feet of hardwood floors, exposed brick walls, and floor-to-ceiling windows were mine, all mine. When I hosted a small housewarming gathering, my parents attended but spent most of the evening making comments like, "It's so much space for just one person, and I hope you're not overextending yourself, dear." Brooke wandered through my rooms with an expression that mixed envy with expectation, as though my achievements somehow belonged to her too. By this time, Brooke had graduated with a communications degree, but showed little interest in building a career. She worked sporadically at fashion boutiques and PR firms, never lasting more than a few months at any position. Our parents subsidized her, finding herself phase, covering her rent when she came up short and funding her frequent career changes. When Brooke met Wesley Pierce at a charity gala, Our parents were ecstatic. The Pierces were Boston aristocracy, old money with the right connections. What no one mentioned, though whispers circulated in certain circles, was that the Pierce fortune had dwindled significantly over the last 2 generations. They maintained the appearance of wealth while quietly selling off assets to sustain their lifestyle. Throughout all these years, I never stopped seeking my parents' approval. Each achievement, each promotion, each milestone was shared with them in the hope that finally, they would see me. Really see me. The validation never came, but I couldn't stop trying. My mother Diana, a former beauty queen who had given up a budding modeling career to raise us, lived vicariously through Brooke's social ascension. My father Robert, an insurance executive who valued stability and appearances, saw Brooke as the daughter who would elevate the family's status through the right marriage. I was the steady one, the reliable one, the one who didn't need attention until I needed something from them. My penthouse became more than just a home. It represented my independence, my success despite their lack of support, and most importantly, my value. The eastern exposure filled the master bedroom with morning light that warmed the custom walnut floors. The kitchen featured marble countertops and professional-grade appliances where I taught myself to cook gourmet meals. The terrace garden, my weekend project, bloomed with herbs and flowers even in Boston's unforgiving climate. Every corner reflected choices I had made for myself, by myself. Little did I know that the space I had created would soon become the battleground for a family war I never wanted to fight. Brooke's engagement to Wesley Pierce unfolded like a fairy tale, at least that's how my mother described it to anyone who would listen. Wesley proposed at sunset on his family's yacht in Nantucket Sound, presenting Brooke with his grandmother's 5-carat diamond ring. When Brooke called to share the news, I could hear my mother's voice in the background already discussing venue options. "We're thinking June at the Pierce family estate," Brooke gushed over the phone. "And Maddie, I want you to be my maid of honor. You're so good at organizing things." What Brooke meant, as I would soon discover, was that she wanted me to handle the difficult vendors, manage the budget spreadsheets, and mediate family disagreements while she enjoyed being the bride. Still, I accepted the role with genuine enthusiasm. Despite our complicated relationship, I loved my sister and wanted her day to be special. The initial budget my parents proposed for the wedding was generous, but reasonable. Until the Pierces got involved. What started as an elegant 150-person celebration quickly expanded to include 300 guests, many of whom were business associates and social connections of the Pierce family. The venue changed from the family estate, which I later learned had been quietly sold 2 years prior, to the exclusive Rosecliff Mansion in Newport, Rhode Island. 3 months before the wedding, my mother called me in a panic. "Madeline, we need to discuss the financial arrangements," she said, her voice tense. "The wedding costs have exceeded our expectations." What followed was a carefully choreographed guilt trip about how my father's recent investment losses and their support of Brooke over the years had strained their resources. Without directly asking, my mother made it clear she expected me to contribute significantly to the wedding expenses. "We're not asking for much," she said, though no specific amount had been mentioned. "You're doing so well now, and this is for your sister." I agreed to cover the cost of the flowers and the rehearsal dinner, an additional $22,000 I hadn't budgeted for. The money would come from the fund I'd been building for a much-needed vacation, but I told myself it was worth it to support my family. My first real encounter with Wesley's parents came during a tasting at the wedding venue. Elizabeth and Harrison Pierce arrived dressed for a yacht club luncheon rather than a vendor meeting. Elizabeth's scrutiny of the menu options was exhausting. Nothing seemed quite good enough for the Pierce standard. During a lull in the conversation, Harrison turned his attention to me. "Brooke tells us you've done quite well in real estate," he said, swirling his wine. "Managed to get yourself a place in Beacon Hill, I hear. Prime location." "Yes, I've been fortunate," I replied, uncomfortable with his interest. "Wise investment," he nodded. Property is one of the few reliable assets these days. Liquid capital can be so fleeting. Elizabeth quickly added, "Wesley and Brooke are looking at properties in Beacon Hill as well. Such a suitable neighborhood for a young couple of their standing." The conversation moved on, but the exchange left me uneasy. Later that evening, I overheard Elizabeth speaking to my mother in hushed tones. "Diana, the situation is delicate. The trust doesn't mature until Wesley's 35th birthday. Until then, they'll need a suitable living arrangement that reflects their position." My mother's response was too quiet to catch, but the concerned look on her face spoke volumes. 2 weeks before the wedding, my best friend Ashley Williams joined me for coffee after we'd spent the day addressing last-minute invitation changes. "You realize what's happening, don't you?" Ashley asked, stirring her latte with unnecessary vigor. "What do you mean?" "Maddie, I've known your family for 20 years. They're setting you up for something. All this talk about Brooke and Wesley needing the right start, the right address, the right everything. They're going to ask you for something big." I dismissed her concerns, but a seed of worry had been planted. That night, I found myself walking through my penthouse, running my fingers along the surfaces I had selected with such care, wondering if Ashley might be right. The rehearsal dinner, which I hosted at an upscale Boston restaurant, should have been a joyful occasion. Instead, it became an uncomfortable preview of what was to come. After several drinks, Harrison Pierce cornered me near the bar. "Beautiful place you have," he said, though he had never visited my penthouse. "Perfect for entertaining." Brooke mentioned the terrace garden, said it would be ideal for summer cocktails. "Brooke hasn't seen my place in almost a year," I replied, confusion evident in my voice. Harrison's momentary discomfort was quickly masked with another sip of his scotch. Must have been Wesley who mentioned it then. Young people today always sharing their aspirations. The night before the wedding, as final preparations reached a fever pitch, my mother found me alone in the bridal suite, organizing Brooke's accessories for the following day. "Madeline," she began, her voice adopting the gentle tone she reserved for difficult conversations, "you've always been our rock. So independent, so capable." I murmured a thank you, focusing on arranging Brooke's jewelry. "Your sister has always needed more guidance, more support," she continued. "Her partnership with Wesley is everything we've hoped for her, but they'll need help establishing themselves." "I've already contributed to the wedding, Mom," I said, a defensive edge creeping into my voice. "Of course, and we're grateful. But a wedding is just one day. Marriage is a lifetime." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "You should consider how you might help them build their future together. After all, family is everything." The implication hung in the air between us, but neither of us acknowledged it directly. As she left the room, a chill settled over me that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The morning of Brooke's wedding dawned with picture-perfect weather, clear blue skies, and a gentle breeze that seemed custom-ordered for the occasion. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 o'clock, allowing ample time for the elaborate preparation process. In the bridal suite, chaos reigned as hairstylists, makeup artists, and photographers circulated among the bridal party. Brooke, naturally, was the calm center of the storm, radiant in her pre-wedding glow. When she stepped into her gown, a custom Vera Wang creation with a 15-foot train, even I felt my breath catch. My complicated, frustrating, beloved sister looked like something from a fairy tale. "You look beautiful, Brooke," I said, helping to arrange her train. For a moment, the sister I remembered from childhood, before the competition and expectations, smiled back at me. "Thanks, Maddie. For everything." The sincerity in her voice made me hope that perhaps, once the wedding stress passed, we might find our way back to a genuine relationship. The ceremony itself was flawless. Against the backdrop of Rosecliff's oceanfront gardens, Brooke and Wesley exchanged vows, while 300 guests looked on. My parents sat in the front row, my mother dabbing at tears with a monogrammed handkerchief, my father beaming with pride. From my position beside Brooke, I watched her become Mrs. Wesley Pierce, hoping this union would bring her the happiness she sought. The reception began with cocktails on the terrace, before moving into the ballroom for dinner. I had just finished my maid of honor duties, organizing the bridal party for introductions, ensuring Brooke's dress was properly bustled for dancing, when my father approached. "Madeline, would you join us for a moment?" "In the library." Something in his tone made my stomach tighten, but I nodded and followed him through the grand hallway into a wood-paneled room where several people waited. My mother, Harrison, and Elizabeth Pierce, and, to my surprise, Brooke and Wesley, still in their wedding finery. "What's going on?" I asked, looking from face to face. "Is everything all right?" My mother stepped forward, taking my hands in hers. "Madeline, dear, we wanted to speak with you privately, as a family, about Brooke and Wesley's future." Harrison Pierce cleared his throat. "We've been discussing the young couple's living situation. As you know, property in the right neighborhoods is essential for maintaining certain connections. We've looked at several options," Elizabeth added, "but nothing suitable is currently available within their means." My father joined in, his business voice now in full effect. "What your mother and I, along with the Pierces, have been discussing is a temporary arrangement, just until Wesley's trust matures." The air in the room seemed to thin as I realized what was happening. Still, I waited, wanting them to actually say the words. Brooke stepped forward, still glowing in her wedding dress. "Maddie, we need a place to live. Somewhere that reflects Wesley's position and allows us to entertain properly. Your penthouse," my mother said simply, "would be perfect for them." For a moment, I thought I had misheard. "My penthouse?" "Just temporarily," my father added quickly. "Perhaps a year or two." "We'd pay rent, of course," Wesley interjected, though the amount he mentioned was less than half the market value. "Where exactly would I live during this temporary arrangement?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. An uncomfortable silence followed before my mother spoke. "You could take Brooke's apartment. It's perfectly adequate for a single person." Brooke's apartment was a one-bedroom unit in a building with constant maintenance issues and no elevator. The comparison to my carefully chosen home was laughable. "Or," Elizabeth Pierce suggested, as though offering a generous alternative, "you could stay in the Pierce family's guest house in Cambridge. It's rarely used these days." I looked at each of their faces, searching for some sign that this was an elaborate joke. Finding none, I took a deep breath. "I'm sorry, but that's not possible. The penthouse is my home. I worked for years to afford it. I'm not giving it up." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Madeline," my father began, his tone hardening, "you need to consider what's best for the family. This isn't about just you," my mother added. "Brooke and Wesley need the right start." "And I needed the right start too," I replied, my voice rising slightly. "I needed help with college. I needed support when I was struggling to break into real estate during a recession. I needed parents who celebrated my achievements. But I managed without any of that." Brooke's face flushed with anger. "So that's it? You're punishing me because Mom and Dad helped me? That's not my fault." "This isn't punishment, Brooke. It's simply me saying no. The penthouse is mine. I earned it. I'm not giving it away." Wesley stepped forward, his aristocratic features arranged in what I assumed was his most persuasive expression. "Madeline, be reasonable. You're one person. We're starting a family. Surely you can see the practical aspects of this arrangement." "What I see," I said, looking directly at him, "is entitlement. You want what I have because it suits your image, not because you've earned it." Elizabeth gasped at my directness, while Harrison's face darkened with anger. My mother moved toward me, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "Madeline Carson, you will not ruin your sister's wedding day with your selfishness. This is about family." "No, Mom. This is about respect. Respect for the choices I've made and the life I've built." What happened next occurred so quickly I barely had time to register it. My mother's hand connected with my cheek in a slap that echoed through the library. The sting spread across my face as shocked silence fell over the room. "Don't be selfish," she hissed, loud enough for everyone to hear. I stood frozen, my hand rising to my burning cheek as the library door opened. Several guests had heard the commotion and peered in, their expressions moving from curiosity to discomfort as they assessed the scene. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the library, past the curious onlookers, through the reception hall where couples danced obliviously, and into the cool evening air. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply left, a calm settling over me that felt almost surreal. As I drove away from Rosecliff, leaving behind the celebration that would continue without me, I realized something fundamental had changed. The slap had broken something irreparable, not just between my mother and me, but in my understanding of my place within my family. What they didn't realize yet was that the daughter they had forced to become independent had learned her lessons too well. I wouldn't just accept this treatment. I would respond to it, methodically, strategically, and without mercy. The morning after the wedding, I woke in my penthouse with a strange sense of calm. The events of the previous evening played through my mind like scenes from someone else's life: the confrontation, my mother's slap, my silent exit. My phone displayed dozens of missed calls and messages, but I wasn't ready to engage with any of them yet. Instead, I made coffee and sat on my terrace, watching the early light play across the Boston skyline. This view, these walls, this space that I had created for myself, they had tried to take it from me as if my achievements were community property to be redistributed according to their whims. By mid-morning, I finally scrolled through the messages. From my father: "Your mother is distraught. You need to apologize for causing a scene." From Brooke: "Thanks for ruining my wedding night. Everyone was talking about your dramatic exit instead of celebrating us." From various relatives: "Variations on family comes first, and you should be ashamed." Only one message offered a different perspective. Ashley had texted: "Heard what happened. They crossed a line. Call me when you're ready to talk." I spent Sunday in a state of suspended animation, processing what had occurred and what it revealed about my family dynamics. By Monday morning, I had formulated a simple plan. I would continue my life as normal while maintaining distance from my family until they acknowledged their inappropriate behavior. This plan lasted precisely 3 hours. At 11:37 a.m., my office receptionist buzzed to inform me that my mother was in the lobby. Diana Carson swept into my office as if the events of Saturday night had never occurred. Dressed impeccably in a Burberry coat and pearl earrings, she placed a small gift bag on my desk. "Peace offering," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Those macarons you like from the French bakery in Back Bay." I left the bag untouched. "What can I do for you, Mom?" She sighed dramatically. "Madeline, we need to move past this unfortunate misunderstanding. Your sister is devastated that you left her reception." "It wasn't a misunderstanding. You demanded I give up my home, then slapped me when I refused." "I reacted poorly," she conceded, though her tone suggested minimal remorse. "But you have to understand the pressure we're all under. The Pierces have certain expectations for their son's lifestyle. That's not my problem. Family problems are everyone's problems, Madeline. We need to find a solution that works for all of us." There already is a solution. Brooke and Wesley can live within their means like everyone else. My mother's facade of pleasantness cracked slightly. They can't just live anywhere. Wesley has appearances to maintain for his career prospects. Then Wesley should earn enough to maintain those appearances. The conversation continued in circles until my assistant knocked to remind me of a client meeting. My mother left with her gift bag of macarons, having achieved nothing except confirming that I wouldn't easily be manipulated. That evening, I met Ashley at our favorite wine bar. After filling her in on my mother's visit, she reached into her purse and pulled out her tablet. "There's something you should see," she said, her expression serious. Ashley worked in finance and had access to certain databases. I did some digging into the Pierce family finances. The documents she showed me confirmed what I had suspected. The Pierce family fortune was largely an illusion. They had been selling assets for years to maintain their lifestyle. Wesley's trust fund, which everyone kept mentioning, contained a fraction of what had been implied. "There's more," Ashley said, swiping to another screen. "Look at the date Brooke toured these properties." I stared at a real estate agent's showing schedule. 3 months before the wedding, Brooke had viewed multiple luxury properties in Beacon Hill, including my building. "She couldn't afford any of these," I murmured. "Exactly. So why tour them unless she already had a plan to acquire one without paying for it," I finished, a cold realization settling in my stomach. Over the next 2 weeks, I pieced together more of the puzzle. A casual conversation with my building's doorman revealed that Brooke and Wesley had visited my penthouse twice while I was on business trips. "Your sister said you asked her to water your plants," he explained apologetically when he saw my shocked expression. A college friend who worked at the architectural firm Wesley occasionally consulted for mentioned that Wesley had been showing people photos of his new place in Beacon Hill weeks before the wedding. The most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. My father's secretary, with whom I had always maintained a friendly relationship, called me with concern. "Madeline, I shouldn't be telling you this, but I overheard your parents discussing your penthouse with the Pierces back in March. Your father suggested they wait until after the honeymoon to have you sign the transfer documents. He seemed confident you wouldn't refuse once it was presented as a fait accompli." The betrayal ran deeper than I had imagined. This wasn't a spontaneous request born of wedding emotions. It was a calculated plan months in the making. They had toured my home without permission, made promises regarding my property, and expected me to comply once socially cornered. I scheduled an appointment with Jessica Thompson, a law school friend who specialized in real estate and family law. After explaining the situation, I asked about my legal vulnerabilities. Could they make any claim on my property? Could they argue I promised it to them? Jessica shook her head firmly. Without written documentation, any verbal claim would be extremely difficult to prove. Your property is solely in your name, purchased with your funds and maintained by you. They have no legal standing whatsoever. What about family pressure? Social pressure? That's not a legal issue, Maddie. That's a personal boundary issue. She leaned forward, her expression serious. The question isn't whether they can take your property, they can't. The question is how you'll respond to this breach of trust. As I left Jessica's office, my phone buzzed with a text from Brooke. "We're back from the honeymoon. Mom says you're still being difficult about the apartment situation. We need to resolve this before we start moving our things." The presumption in her message crystallized my resolve. This wasn't just about a property dispute. It was about years of manipulation, favoritism, and entitlement. My family had shown me exactly how they viewed me, not as a person with my own life and achievements, but as a resource to be tapped for Brooke's benefit. I spent that evening sitting in each room of my penthouse, remembering the overtime hours, missed social events, and sacrifices that had made this space mine. In the soft glow of the city lights streaming through my windows, I made my decision. The time for passive acceptance was over. If my family wanted war, I would give them one fought on my terms, with my weapons of choice. The term revenge carries connotations of hot-blooded retaliation, of actions taken in the heat of anger. What I planned was different, cold, calculated, and designed not to hurt but to correct. I would establish boundaries that should have existed all along and allow natural consequences to unfold. My first step was to consult with Dr. Eleanor Bennett, a therapist specializing in family dynamics. I needed to ensure my response was proportional and healthy, not driven purely by emotion. "What you're describing," Dr. Bennett said during our second session, "is not revenge in the traditional sense. You're seeking to establish consequences for boundary violations, which is both appropriate and necessary for healthy relationships." "It feels like revenge," I admitted. "That's because you've been conditioned to view any self-protective action as selfish or punitive. Your family has trained you to prioritize their needs above your own. Breaking that pattern will naturally feel uncomfortable." With Dr. Bennett's guidance, I developed a framework for moving forward, one that prioritized my well-being while leaving room for genuine reconciliation should my family choose that path. Armed with this psychological clarity, I turned my attention to practical matters. My profession had equipped me with research skills that I now applied to my own family situation. What I discovered was illuminating. My parents' financial records, accessible through the mortgage refinancing they had initiated for wedding expenses, revealed years of systematic support for Brooke that far exceeded what I had imagined. Beyond college tuition, they had paid off her credit cards multiple times, covered the security deposit and first 6 months' rent for each new apartment she moved to, and even financed a failed jewelry business venture she had abandoned after 3 months. More troubling was the discovery that they had taken a substantial home equity loan to pay for the wedding, a financial strain they had concealed while asking me to contribute additional funds. The $22,000 I had provided hadn't supplemented their budget. It had prevented them from extending themselves even further into debt. Wesley's family situation proved equally revealing. Through industry contacts and public records, I confirmed that the Pierce family had indeed sold their Nantucket estate, along with 2 other properties. Harrison Pierce's investment firm had lost several major clients following a poorly executed merger, and their lifestyle now depended largely on their remaining social capital, connections that could translate into opportunities for Wesley. With this knowledge, I developed a 3-part strategy. First, professional consequences. I would remove myself as the safety net that had enabled my family's financial irresponsibility. This wasn't spite. It was allowing them to experience the natural outcomes of their choices. Second, financial independence. I would protect my assets and create structures that ensured my family could never again attempt to appropriate what I had built. Third, truth revelation. I would strategically share what I had learned with key individuals, not as gossip, but as necessary context for understanding my boundaries. The execution began with practical security measures. I changed the locks on my penthouse and informed the building management and doormen that no one was to be admitted to my unit without my explicit authorization. Not family, not friends, no one. I installed a security system with cameras that would alert me to any attempted entry. Next, I contacted my bank, investment advisors, and insurance agents to remove my parents as emergency contacts and beneficiaries, replacing them with Ashley and a cousin I had always been close with. I updated my will with Jessica's help, creating a living trust that specifically excluded immediate family members from making claims on my estate. The financial disentanglement continued as I systematically removed myself from any shared accounts, services, or memberships with my family. I canceled the joint credit card I had maintained for emergencies, withdrew from the family cell phone plan, and resigned from the country club membership my father had insisted we share for networking purposes. Each of these actions was documented meticulously and executed without emotional announcements. This wasn't about punishing my family. It was about establishing this separate financial existence that should have existed all along. The most challenging aspect of my plan involved Wesley's professional connections. As a real estate developer, I had relationships with many of the same firms and individuals that Wesley depended on for his architectural consulting work. I didn't seek to damage his career, but I would no longer facilitate it either. When Harrison Pierce called to invite me to a networking event that would be beneficial for Wesley, I declined politely but firmly. When a mutual business associate asked if I could put in a good word for Wesley on a downtown development project, I simply replied that I preferred to keep business and family separate, a boundary that should have existed from the beginning. Throughout this process, I maintained limited contact with my family. I responded to messages with brief, neutral replies. I declined Sunday dinners with polite excuses about work commitments. When pressed about the apartment situation, I simply stated that there was no situation to discuss. My home was not available. Brooke and Wesley, meanwhile, faced the reality of their financial situation. Without my penthouse as an option, they leased a 2-bedroom apartment in a less prestigious neighborhood. According to Ashley, who had heard through mutual friends, Brooke was devastated by the necessity of explaining to her new social circle why they weren't living in Beacon Hill as she had apparently promised. 6 weeks after the wedding, my father requested a meeting to discuss family matters. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown, where he attempted to bridge the growing divide. "Your mother misses you," he began, stirring his coffee unnecessarily. "We all do." "I've been busy with work," I replied, which was true. I had channeled my emotional energy into expanding my client base. "Madeline, I understand you were upset about the penthouse discussion, but surely it's time to move past this. Family disagreements happen." This wasn't a disagreement, Dad. It was an ambush, followed by physical and emotional abuse when I didn't comply. He winced at my characterization. "Your mother regrets losing her temper. She was under tremendous stress with the wedding." Has she said that? That she regrets slapping me. His hesitation told me everything. She's not good at apologies, you know that. Then we don't have anything to discuss. As I gathered my belongings to leave, he made one last attempt. Brooke and Wesley are struggling with their housing situation. Nothing they can find meets their needs. Their needs and their means are misaligned. That's a budgeting problem, not a me problem. My father's expression hardened. You've changed, Madeline. No, Dad. I've just stopped accepting the role you assigned me. As the weeks passed, my strategy evolved based on new information and changing circumstances. When I discovered that my parents had listed me as a financial guarantor on Brooke's student loans without my knowledge, something I found while reviewing my credit report, I contacted the loan servicer to have my name removed, forcing my parents to either take full responsibility or risk Brooke's credit. When Brooke attempted to use my business address for a credit application, another discovery from my regular credit monitoring, I sent a formal cease and desist letter through Jessica. It wasn't punitive, it was protective. 3 months after the wedding, my plan was fully implemented. I had created the separation that should have existed naturally between an independent adult and her family of origin. I had protected my assets from future attempts at appropriation, and I had positioned myself to respond to any genuine efforts at reconciliation from a place of strength rather than obligation. What I hadn't anticipated was how empowering this process would be. Free from the constant drain of family expectations and manipulations, my business flourished. I secured 2 major development projects that had previously seemed beyond my reach. I developed new friendships with people who respected my boundaries. I even began dating again, meeting Ryan Campbell, a commercial litigation attorney who understood my family situation without judgment. The revenge, if it could be called that, wasn't in hurting my family. It was in finally prioritizing myself. As autumn settled over Boston, the full impact of my boundary setting began to manifest in ways I hadn't entirely anticipated. What had begun as self-protection evolved into a powerful reclamation of my identity separate from family expectations. The first significant moment came when my parents' financial advisor contacted me about contributing to their retirement planning. This had been an annual conversation for years, subtle pressure to help secure their future since Brooke would never be in a position to assist. This time, my response was different. I'm focusing on my own retirement planning now, I explained calmly. I'm sure you understand the importance of financial independence. His pause spoke volumes. Your parents seemed confident you would continue the annual contributions. They didn't consult me before making that assumption. Within days, my mother called, her voice tight with controlled anger. The financial advisor says you're refusing to help with our retirement. After everything we've done for you. I'm not refusing to help, Mom. I'm prioritizing my financial security, just as you taught me to do. This is about the wedding, isn't it? You're punishing us. No, it's about me making independent decisions about my money, just like you and Dad make independent decisions about yours. The conversation ended without resolution, but I felt no guilt, only a growing sense of liberation. My professional disengagement from Wesley's career had more immediate consequences. Without my connections facilitating introductions and vouching for his reliability, he struggled to secure the prestigious projects he had counted on. According to industry gossip, he had been forced to take on smaller residential jobs that he considered beneath his talents. When we encountered each other at a Chamber of Commerce event, his resentment was palpable. Enjoying your campaign of family destruction, he asked under his breath as we stood near the bar. I'm enjoying professional boundaries, I replied, maintaining my composure. Your career success should never have depended on your sister-in-law. His face flushed. Brooke was right about you. Always keeping score, always holding grudges. Is that what she says? Interesting, considering I paid for a quarter of your wedding without complaint. I walked away before he could respond, leaving him to contemplate the irony of his accusations. The situation with Brooke evolved more slowly. After weeks of passive-aggressive text messages, she suggested meeting for lunch to clear the air. We met at a restaurant equidistant from our workplaces, a gesture of neutrality I appreciated. You look good, she said as we settled at our table, sounding almost surprised. Work must be going well. It is, I acknowledged. How are you adjusting to married life? It would be better if we had adequate housing, she said, the familiar note of entitlement creeping into her voice. The apartment is temporary, of course. Wesley deserves better. Most people start small and work their way up. She sighed dramatically. That's easy for you to say from your penthouse. Some of us had different life paths. Yes, we did. I worked 3 jobs through college and started at the bottom of my industry during a recession. You had your education fully funded and received ongoing financial support from our parents. Her expression shifted from self-pity to indignation. Are you saying I haven't worked for anything? I'm saying we've had different levels of support, which has led to different outcomes. That's not a judgment. It's a fact. The conversation circled uncomfortably until Brooke finally addressed the elephant in the room. Mom and Dad are hurt by your distance. They feel like you've abandoned the family. I haven't abandoned anyone. I've established boundaries after my boundaries were violated. The penthouse thing? That was just a suggestion. It was a demand, Brooke. Made after you had already toured my home without permission and told people you would be living there. Followed by Mom slapping me when I refused. Her silence confirmed what I had suspected. She had known about the plan all along. We thought you'd understand once we explained the situation, she finally said. The situation being that Wesley's family isn't as wealthy as they pretend to be, and you needed my property to maintain appearances? Her eyes widened. How did you? I'm in real estate, Brooke. Property records are public. Asset sales are traceable. The remainder of lunch was tense but civil. As we parted, Brooke attempted one last appeal to family loyalty. We used to be close, Maddie. Remember when we were kids? Before everything got so complicated. I remember, I said, genuinely nostalgic for those simpler times. But we can't go back. We can only go forward with honest relationships or not at all. As I implemented my boundaries, I discovered unexpected allies. My father's sister, Aunt Caroline, called me after hearing my parents' version of events. I want to hear your side, she said simply. Your mother called you selfish, but that doesn't sound like the niece I know. I shared the facts without embellishment, the ambush at the wedding, the unauthorized tours of my home, the slap, the ongoing entitlement. Your mother pulled similar stunts with her sisters and Caroline's side, always expecting others to sacrifice for her comfort. I'm proud of you for standing your ground. Her support reinforced my conviction that I wasn't overreacting or being vindictive. I was simply refusing to participate in unhealthy dynamics that had persisted for too long. The most satisfying aspect of my so-called revenge was watching my parents face the financial reality they had created. Without my contributions and with Brooke now expecting their continued support as a married woman, they were forced to downsize from their suburban home to a condo. When news of their exciting decision to simplify reached me through family channels, I recognized the face-saving narrative for what it was. My father's retirement, once planned for age 62, was postponed indefinitely. My mother's social media posts about embracing minimalism couldn't disguise the financial necessity behind their move. I took no pleasure in their difficulties, but I recognized the importance of natural consequences. For years, they had made financial decisions based on the assumption that I would supplement their resources while they directed those resources toward Brooke. Without that arrangement, they had to confront the reality of their choices. 6 months after the wedding, my parents made one final attempt to restore the previous dynamic. They invited me to dinner at their new condo, and against my better judgment, I accepted. The evening began pleasantly enough with careful small talk about neutral topics. As dessert was served, however, my father cleared his throat in the way he always did before making a business proposition. Your mother and I have been thinking about family harmony, he began. We've all been through a difficult period, and it's time to put it behind us. My mother nodded eagerly. Family should always come first, Madeline. I agree that healthy family relationships are important, I replied cautiously. Excellent, my father continued. Then you'll understand why we need to discuss the family financial strategy. Brooke and Wesley are planning to start a family soon, and they'll need a larger place. Meanwhile, our retirement portfolio has faced some challenges. I set down my coffee cup carefully. Are you asking me for money? Not asking, my mother interjected quickly. Discussing family resources allocation. We've always been a family that supports each other. In one direction, I pointed out. You support Brooke. I support myself. And now you want me to support all of you. That's an ungenerous characterization, my father said, his tone hardening. It's an accurate one. And my answer is no. The facade of family reconciliation crumbled immediately. After everything we've done for you, my mother began, her voice rising. What exactly have you done for me, Mom? List it for me. Be specific. Her inability to produce concrete examples beyond giving you life and providing a roof over your head as a child spoke volumes. As I prepared to leave, my father made one last appeal. This isn't who we raised you to be, Madeline. You're right, I agreed, gathering my coat. You raised me to be a supporting character in Brooke's life. I decided to become the protagonist in my own instead. Walking away from their condo that evening, I felt no anger, no resentment, only clarity. The revenge they accused me of was simply me living authentically without catering to their expectations. It was the most powerful response I could have chosen. 1 year after Brooke's wedding, I stood on my penthouse terrace watching the sunset paint the Boston skyline in shades of gold and pink. The garden I had cultivated was in full bloom, herbs and flowers thriving in carefully arranged containers. Inside, Ryan was preparing dinner, our 1-year anniversary of dating. The past 12 months had brought significant changes, both expected and surprising. My professional life had flourished beyond my projections. With my emotional energy no longer drained by family drama, I had expanded my real estate development company to include a small team and had completed 2 major projects that earned industry recognition. My personal growth had been equally significant. Through continued work with Dr. Bennett, I had processed the complex emotions surrounding my family relationships, the lingering hurt, the occasional guilt, the relief of liberation. I had learned to recognize the difference between healthy boundaries and punitive distance, between self-respect and vindictiveness. The most unexpected developments came from my family themselves. After months of silence following our final confrontation, my father reached out with a brief email. I've been reflecting on our last conversation. You raised points I wasn't prepared to hear. I'm not ready to discuss this further, but I wanted you to know I'm thinking about what you said. It wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement, something I had never received from him before. Brooke and Wesley's situation had evolved in ways that validated my decisions. The apartment they had considered beneath them became their permanent residence when Wesley's architectural practice struggled to attract the high-end clients he had counted on. According to family gossip, they had postponed their plans for children due to financial constraints. What surprised me most was my lack of satisfaction in their difficulties. I had expected to feel vindicated, perhaps even pleased, that they were experiencing the natural consequences of their entitlement. Instead, I felt only a distant compassion. Their struggle wasn't my victory, it was simply the reality they had created for themselves. My mother remained the most resistant to our new dynamic. Her attempts to re-establish control ranged from guilt-inducing messages, "I cry myself to sleep wondering where I went wrong with you," to false medical emergencies designed to compel my attention. Each time, I responded with calm detachment, offering appropriate support without sacrificing my boundaries. The most healing relationship proved to be with my Aunt Caroline, who had become something of a surrogate mother figure. Unlike my parents, she celebrated my successes without expectation or comparison. Her wisdom about family patterns helped me understand the generational dynamics that had shaped my mother's behavior. Diana was always told her value was in her beauty and charm, Aunt Caroline explained during one of our regular lunches. When she had daughters, she projected those same measures of worth: beauty for Brooke, utility for you. It doesn't excuse her behavior, but it might help explain it. This context didn't erase the hurt, but it allowed me to view my family with more compassion and less resentment, a perspective that proved invaluable when a family crisis emerged. 3 months ago, my father suffered a minor heart attack. Despite our strained relationship, I didn't hesitate to visit him in the hospital. I arranged for a second opinion from a cardiologist in my professional network and helped navigate the insurance paperwork that overwhelmed my mother. What I didn't do was equally important. I didn't offer financial assistance beyond practical support. I didn't move back into their orbit of control. I maintained my boundaries while offering appropriate compassion. During one hospital visit, as my father dozed and my mother stepped out to speak with the doctor, Brooke and I found ourselves alone in the waiting room. "I've been thinking about the wedding," she said abruptly. "About what happened with you and Mom." I waited, giving her space to continue. "I always thought you were the lucky one, having your own place, your career, your independence. I never saw how hard you worked for it because I never had to work that hard. Everything just came to me. We had different paths, I acknowledged. But I expected your path to benefit me in the end. We all did." She met my eyes directly. "I'm sorry, Maddie. What we tried to do with your penthouse was wrong. It wasn't a complete reckoning, but it was a start, the first genuine acknowledgement from any family member that my boundaries were justified." As for Ryan, his presence in my life had been transformative. Unlike previous relationships where I had unconsciously sought to recreate the approval-seeking dynamic of my family, with Ryan I found partnership based on mutual respect. His own experience with complicated family relationships gave him insight into my situation without judgment. "Healthy families want each member to thrive," he observed one evening as we discussed my ongoing navigation of family boundaries. "They don't demand sacrifice from one to elevate another." This simple truth became my guiding principle as I moved forward. I remained open to authentic connection with my family, but unwavering in my requirement for respect. Some days brought progress, others brought setbacks. The journey wasn't linear, but it was consistently moving toward greater health. The revenge my family had accused me of, establishing independence, requiring respect, allowing natural consequences, had transformed into something else entirely. Healing, not just for me, but potentially for all of us as painful truths gave way to more authentic relationships. Standing on my terrace as Ryan called me in for dinner, I reflected on the lesson that had emerged from this difficult chapter. The greatest revenge against those who try to diminish you isn't to diminish them in return. It's to flourish so completely that their limitations can no longer contain you. My penthouse, once the battleground for family warfare, had reclaimed its rightful status as my sanctuary, a space I had earned, created, and protected. The fact that I now chose to share it with someone who respected my boundaries made it all the more precious. As I turned to join Ryan inside, I felt gratitude for the painful awakening that had led me here. Sometimes, it takes a slap to wake you up to your own power. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who tried to take advantage of your success? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about standing up for yourself and finding your own path. Remember, healthy relationships should lift you up, not drain you dry. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you strength in navigating your own family dynamics.